Oftentimes we'll hear that people resist change. What I would argue is that we don't resist change at all. All day, every day, we sign up for change. We change house, we change spouse, we change countries, we change jobs, we change throughout our lives. We are down for change when we think change is going to be good for us. And every day that we find that, sliver of change is good, we'll enroll in it. So it's not that we resist change. What we resist is loss. And that resistance to loss is fast and furious. It doesn't matter if the loss is real or perceived, our reactions are the same. So in the face of change, oftentimes you'll hear people say that others don't understand their brilliant ideas. It's not that people don't understand your brilliant ideas. Oftentimes it's that they understand those ideas and they understand as well what they're going to have to lose in service to making good on those ideas. So in the face of change, we have two levers really. One is loss. How do we acknowledge and mitigate the loss that we ask people to take on in the face of disruption and change? And listen, often that loss is quite real. It's a loss of identity, loss of a sense of competence, loss of certainty, loss of expertise. All of the very things that most of us have built our careers on in terms of certainty end up being threatened in the face of change. So the one lever is loss, helping people to acknowledge, predict, and mitigate loss. The other lever is purpose. If you can amp up people's sense of purpose, the possibility, then their ability to weather that loss becomes so much more profound. And the higher you are on the organizational chart, the more people are calibrated to you. They're looking at you. They're noticing how you're weathering loss, how you're mitigating and managing disruption. And so a first move for folks who are high on the food chain in an organization, the very people we call leaders, is to check in on your own stomach for loss. What do you do in the face of that? Because other people will absolutely have their eyes on you. So your ability to manage yourself through loss is key to helping those around you who are looking to you for that certainty in those moments to do the same. Leadership is a set of ideas built at Harvard's Kennedy School over the last 40 years. It was designed at the Kennedy School in the face of big public problems to give people a strategy in the face of those big public problems. And since then, it's been used around the world and across sectors. What adaptive leadership does is it really separates the idea of leadership from authority. So oftentimes we kind of conflate these two. We believe that the work of leadership happens at the top of the organizational chart, rather than the idea that leadership is an activity that anyone, anywhere inside of an organization can step into. So that's the first key distinction at the heart of adaptive leadership. The second key distinction at the heart of adaptive leadership is parsing out technical from adaptive work. So most of us, we grew up, we went to school, we were employed because we had technical expertise. There's a set of ideas where we understand on a deep level those technical ideas. What adaptive challenges are those challenges where there are no easy answers, there aren't any current manuals or protocols, and in the face of adaptive work, we really have to learn and experiment our way through. One of the challenges too is that in the face of adaptive challenges, most of us go back to that technical expertise and we attempt to apply technical expertise to adaptive challenges. And what that means is that ultimately those adaptive challenges continue to resurface. Technical challenges are things like bypass surgery. So it isn't that they're simple, they can actually be quite complex, but it's that we can learn our way through them. And with enough experience, we can, in a very trusting way, continue to solve those sorts of challenges. Adaptive work, on the other hand, It's really novel. It asks us to parse out legacy practices from next practices. It oftentimes asks us to really rethink and reprioritize deeply held values. So for example, an adaptive challenge is developing sound immigration policy or changing a community's eating habits. The third key idea at the heart of adaptive leadership is the notion that for any organization or individual to survive and thrive, you've got to adapt. So it comes from evolutionary biology. You've got to be disciplined and strategic in terms of what those adaptations are, and it's also quite conservative. So 90 to 95% of individual and organizational life stays the same. It's about finding that 3 to 5% that allows you to survive and in turn to thrive. Ability to parse out what's legacy. Those practices that you continue to reiterate because you're doing things as you've always done them. See, the pull of legacy is incredibly profound because often it means letting go of the cash cow in service to something that's untested. It also means letting go of the people who built that cash cow and their sort of vision for where the organization is going. So parsing out legacy practices, those that oftentimes are so difficult to let go of because so much of the business has been built upon those. So that capacity to say that's legacy, it's no longer serving us, setting that aside to make room for innovation is a key practice. And it's a practice that's connected to a lot of deep loyalties. Loyalties to the past and loyalties to the people who built that. The second capacity that's key to build is the capacity to manage yourself. For many of us, in the face of disruption, in the face of uncertainty, disequilibrium, our desire is to quash that or to protect people from threats out there. And while all of that is well-meaning, it often tends to reiterate cycles of dependence rather than generating capacity. Because what we need is capacity in the many, not the few. So the ability to manage yourself, because again, people are watching you when you're at the top. Your ability to manage yourself in the face of conflict. You know, conflict is incredibly important. And so starting to notice what happens for you as heat rises, as the people who matter to you begin to really battle over what's next and the future of an organization, part of the work of leadership is holding that conflict, encouraging it, identifying it as productive if you're going to begin to, as I said, parse out those legacy practices from those next practices that spur and spawn innovation. The third practice that's really key is figuring out how to untangle authority structures, which are great when work is technical, from the work of leadership. And that means really protecting voices of leadership from below. It means listening in on dissension as canaries in the coal mine. It means not allowing the loudest voices to be the determining factor of the direction that you head, but actually the voices that begin to anticipate the horizon. What's incredibly challenging is making change before it's urgent and emergent. And yet that's the work that we're all about in the face of the kinds of disruption and change and the pace of that change that those of us working now are all facing.